Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Profound. I know it's been a while, but I have come back with a comprehensive PowerPoint on the topic Divide and Conquer. This is the oldest technique used by people in power to keep people divided so they're easier to control and then therefore conquer. And a quote from Miss Eleanor Roosevelt: pit race against race, religion against religion, prejudice against prejudice, divide and conquer. We must not let that happen here. And she is pointing out how they have used social constructs and spiritual ideologies and weaponized them so people will be fighting against themselves and not against the people in power. So, let's start with the basics. What is divide and conquer? At its core, it's a deliberate strategy to fragment groups by exploiting or imposing differences, whether physical, cultural, or ideological, to make control easier. Think of it as weakening the whole by breaking it into isolated parts that can't unite against a common foe. Its roots go deep. Evolutionary and prehistoric rivalries over scarce resources like food and land, mythically in ancient stories where gods intervened to scatter humanity, as we'll see soon. The mechanism is simple yet devastating. Amplify existing divisions, like territory or language, to sow confusion or isolation, turning potential allies into rivals. Our scope today spans from 10,000 BCE's hunter-gatherer clashes to the present day, blending hard history, epic lore, and cutting-edge technology. This tactic isn't abstract, it's powered empires, justified conquest, and now fuels online radicalization. Understanding it empowers us to resist. So now we're going to go into why divide and conquer works. Physiologically, it's wired in us through in-group, out-group dynamics. Our brains evolved to favor us over them for survival, and scarcity or even divine decrees in myths amplify this tribalism. In power dynamics, ancient lore often portrays gods or rulers as the architects of division, scattering humanity to quash rebellion and consolidate control, preventing a united front that could topple the elite. We've seen tactics evolve from implicit prehistoric splits like clans fighting over fertile valleys to more overt mythic language confusion that isolates communities. The outcome? Scattered people become easier to rule. No shared language means no shared plans. No unity means no uprising. This isn't just a theory. Studies in social psychology, like those on social identity theory, show how these dynamics persist today in everything from office politics to global conflicts. By recognizing why it works, we can start dismantling it. Now, we're going to go way back to the prehistoric origins in the Neolithic period, around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE. This was the dawn of the Neolithic Revolution. Humans shifted from nomadic hunting to settled agriculture, creating surpluses but also fierce rivalries over prime land, water sources, and grazing areas. The tactic here was territorial fragmentation. Early clans and villages staked out exclusive zones, preventing the broad coalitions that hunter-gatherers once formed for big game hunts or migrations. A prime example of this is Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, one of the world's oldest temple complexes around 9,500 BC, which some historians are starting to say is older than that. Its massive carved pillars and ritual enclosures likely unified local groups for ceremonies, but deliberately excluded outsiders, fostering in-group loyalty while deepening divides with neighboring clans. The impact? This laid the foundation for all later boundary setting and even mythic divisions we'll discuss, turning natural scarcity into a tool for dominance. Archaeology shows these sites weren't just spiritual, they were power centers that fragmented society into controllable pockets. Now, we're going to move forward in time a little bit to the Ubaid period in Mesopotamia, roughly 5,500 to 4,000 BCE. We see proto-urban growth exploding along the flood-prone Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Villages swelled into early towns, but controlling irrigation became a flashpoint. Floods could enrich or destroy crops. The tactic? Engineering physical boundaries like canals and mud brick walls to divide communities over water rights, turned shared rivers into contested borders. Take Eridu, often called the world's first city around 5400 BCE. Its elite temples, dedicated to the water god Enki, centralized power in priest-kings who doled out resources, isolating peripheral farming groups and preventing unified water management. The impact was profound. Social hierarchies crystallized, with the elite at the top, priming the ground for mythic narratives of divine control over chaos. Excavations reveal Ubaid pottery and seals marking owned territory, showing how these divisions weren't accidental but strategic, echoing in later empires. Now, we're going to enter the early Sumerian period, around 4000 to 3000 BCE, where we see the world's first true urban era with Uruk's explosive expansion. The city grew to 50,000 people, pioneering writing and wheels, but this created a web of interdependent yet bitterly rival city-states like Lachish, and Kish, each vying for trade routes and farmland. The tactic was economic and geographic isolation. Rulers engineered trade imbalances, flooding rivals with luxury goods while withholding essentials, weakening potential alliances. For instance, Uruk dominated Kish by controlling lapis lazuli imports from afar, forcing Kish into unequal exchanges that drained its resources and sowed resentment. The impact? It fragmented Greater Sumer into a patchwork of feuds, setting the stage for mythic epics that justified conquest as divine will. Cuneiform tablets from this era record these rivalries, revealing how isolation turned neighbors into perpetual enemies, a blueprint for Akkadian unification. Now, we're going to jump into the mythological deep lore of divide and conquer. Sumerian and Babylonian myths from 2500 to 1800 BCE that frame division not as human scheming, but as divine strategy to keep mortals in check. The overarching theme, gods or god-kings scatter humanity through language confusion or other means to curb dangerous unity and enable rule, portraying fragmentation as cosmic order. Our key texts are from the Sumerian epic Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta from 2100 BC, where a god fragments tongues to aid conquest, and its biblical echo in Genesis 11's Tower of Babel story, adapted around the 6th century BCE. These aren't just tales, they reflect real linguistic splits during Mesopotamia's urbanization, as Sumerian gave way to Akkadian dialects amid empire building. The impact? Myths legitimized rulers as God-chosen dividers, turning cultural chaos into a tool for control. We'll unpack these next, seeing how they mirror today's digital babbles. So, we're going to dive deeper into the epic Enmerkar and the Lord Aratta, composed around 2100 BCE. Tells of Enmerkar, the legendary king of Uruk and possible prototype for biblical Nimrod, clashing with the distant Lord Aratta, a mountainous kingdom near modern Ararat. The tactic is pure divine divide and conquer. The god Enki, master of wisdom and water, deliberately confuses human languages to fracture primordial unity, aiding Enmerkar's ambitious ziggurat-building conquest. In the story, humanity starts in harmony, all spoke in one tongue, but Enki shatters this to sow discord, making coordinated resistance impossible. Enmerkar cleverly prays to reverse it just enough to demand tribute from Aratta, extracting gold and lapis for his temple. The deep insight? This mirrors Sumer's real push to subdue northern rivals through divine fragmentation, as cuneiform fragments show linguistic diversity exploding with trade wars. It's a mythic justification for empire. Gods divide so kings can conquer. Jumping into the Tower of Babel, which was just discussed, in Genesis 11 is a direct biblical echo of Sumerian myth, influenced post 2100 BCE during the Babylonian exile. Here, unified humanity builds a massive ziggurat in Babel, modeled on Babylon's real Etemenmaki temple, to reach the heavens, symbolizing hubris and collective power. The tactic? God intervenes with classic divide and conquer, confusing languages overnight to scatter the building across the earth, halting their ascent and ensuring disunity. This parallels Enmerkar's Enki dividing tongues. Both use linguistic chaos to curb ambition, with ziggurats as bold power grabs that threaten divine order. Historically, it ties to Entomaches rebuild around 2300 BCE under the Akkadians, amid a real shift from Sumerian to Akkadian languages, fragmented communication in a booming empire. Clay tablets confirm Babylon's Gate of the Gods inspired the tale. Myths like this weren't whimsy, they encoded strategies to justify scattering people for control. So, we're going to zoom out to just the language division as a whole, and just how this creates this divide and conquer, and creates this babel of tongues by isolating groups, blocking communication and alliances. Just imagine trying to revolt when you can't even agree on words. In Mesopotamian text, Enmerker bypasses this confusion by inventing writing. Early cuneiform around 3200 BCE to send sealed messages, centralizing elite knowledge while the masses babble in discord. The impact is empire-building gold. Myths like these justified rulers as restorers of order, while real linguistic diversity from around 3000 BCE. Sumerian dialects splintering into Akkadian made it easier for the Akkadian kings like Sargon to rule over fragmented Sumerians. So you can see the earliest methods of divide and conquer had to do with splitting the languages for dominance. Now we're going to move away from language to another thing that we have talked about just a little bit, and it's creating boundaries for division, spanning the Neolithic to Sumerian areas and amplified by the mythic lore we've just explored. In context, these weren't just lines on maps, they were lifelines in harsh landscapes, from river valleys to floodplains. The mechanism, physical borders like rivers or walls, echoed language splits and myths, isolating rivals and turning shared spaces into no man's land. For example, in the Jemdot Nasir period, around 3100 BCE, pictographic seals listed cities like Ur and Uruk, implying elite control over interactions to enforce divisions and prevent free trade coalitions. The impact was coalition proofing. No unified front means easier pickoffs, blending physical walls with mythic fragmentation to keep power centralized. Archaeology from these seals shows tallies of goods funneled to rulers, proving boundaries weren't defensive. They were offensive tools for conquest. Boundaries took a strategic leap in ancient empires, like the Akkadian expansion under Sargon around 2334 BCE. He unified a divided Sumer through ruthless tactics. In this context, Sumer city-states were a powder of keg feuds ripe for exploitation. Sargon's tactic, selective bribery and alliances with key players to isolate the rest, turning borders into moats of betrayal. He conquered Kish, for instance, by exploiting bitter Uruk-Lagish rivalries, allying with one to crush the other and instill loyal governors behind new provincial lines. The legacy? It echoed Enmerker's mythic subjugation of Arata, divide the tongues or tribes, then demand tribute. Sargon's inscription boasts of 34 conquered cities, showing how boundaries created a web of dependencies, making his empire the first world system built on fragmentation. Setting an example for later. Now, jumping to Egypt, social boundaries were as vital as the Nile itself, emerging in the pre-dynastic area from 4000 to 3100 BCE, where nomes, semi-anonymous regions, competed fiercely for floodwater and fertile silt. The tactic? Early kings like Scorpion, around 3200 BCE, exploited these regional divides, forging temporary alliances to unify under their banner. The iconic Narmer palette, a ceremonial slate from the time, depicts Narmer, possibly Scorpion's successor, smiting Delta nome chiefs, using hit-and-run coalitions to fragment resistance before redrawing borders as pharaonic provinces. The impact? These boundaries reinforced divine rule, pharaohs as gods incarnate, with nomes as isolated fiefdoms loyal only to the throne. Hieroglyphs on the palette show bound captives, symbolizing how division turned potential rebels into subjects. Across the Aegean, divide and conquer played out in ancient Greece after the Mycenaean collapse around 1200 BCE, leaving a mosaic of fragmented polis, independent city-states like Athens and Sparta, divided by mountains and seas. The tactic? External powers, especially the early Persians, funded these rivalries to keep Greeks weak. The Ionian Revolt of 499 BCE is a textbook example. Persian gold exploited simmering Athens-Spartan tensions, arming Ionic Greeks against mainland rivals and sparking a chain of betrayals. The outcome? It prevented true pan-Hellenic unity for centuries, until Alexander the Great flipped the script in 338 BCE. Herodotus' histories detail how Persian envoys sowed discord with bribes, showing division as a foreign policy weapon that kept Greece a fractured playground for empires. The Romans actually perfected divide et impera, divide and rule, during their empire's diverse tribal conquests from 509 BCE to 476 CE, spanning Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. In this vast context, Rome faced a babel of cultures and languages, much like our mythic lore. The tactic? Redrawing provincial lines as administrative borders while forgiving tactical alliances to fragment locals. Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars provide the example. In 58 to 50 BC, he allied with the Arverni tribe against their rivals Aedui, pitting Celtic groups in a civil bloodbath before Roman legions mopped up. Third party. Our visual, a map of Roman provinces, highlights these engineered divides, straight lines cutting through tribal lands. Caesar's Commentary de Bello Gallico brags 800 conquered towns, proving how this kept the empire's 50 million subjects in check for centuries. Now we can even jump over to China, where strategic boundaries wove through myths and history, starting with the Jia dynasty, legends around 2070 of tribal splits amid Yellow River floods. The tactic evolved in the Shang dynasty, where oracle bones, turtle shells inscribed with questions to ancestors, predicted and exploited clan conflicts to justify raids. By the Warring States period from 475 to 221 BC, it was full-scale boundary wars, fortified walls and river-bound borders isolated kingdoms, turning neighbors into enemies. The Qin's espionage networks, for example, bribed border lords to betray alliances, enabling unification under Qin Shi Huang in 221 BCE. The impact? The division birthed the Great Wall as both shield and divider. Bamboo annals and oracle inscriptions reveal how elites read divide signs to fan feuds, mirroring Mesopotamian gods but with a Confucian twist on hierarchical order. As you can see, there's a common theme throughout all these ancient conquests, and it has to all do with how the inner people have been divided and at war with each other. I think I might even go to an example later, but another example also comes with the Bible, as the tribes of Israel and Judah were constantly at war with each other, even though they had the same ancestry. Now, we're going to jump into another form of divide and conquer that we know very well today and has been very prevalent in our society, and that is racism, or ethnic othering, and has long been a divide and conquer tool. Evolving from prehistorical instincts to formalized ancient hierarchies, in context, early humans labeled outsiders as threats for survival. By Sumer around 2500 BCE, it became policy. Sumerian texts branded mountain tribes like the Gutian as barbarians, subhuman hordes, to justify brutal conquest and enslavement. The tactic? Dehumanize others through stereotypes, echoing mythic scatters like Enki's language confusion, to rally in groups around shared superiority. The impact? It unified elites for exploitation. Gutian raids were spun as divide punishment, masking resource grabs. Cylinder seals depict these others as beasts, showing how racism fragmented Mesopotamia, paving the way for colonial horrors that we'll cover next. Racism scaled globally in colonial divide and conquer. As European powers from the 16th to the 20th century racialized entire continents to extract wealth. In the Americas, for example, Spanish colonizers under the casta system pitted indigenous people against enslaved Africans, ranking them in a pyramid with Europeans at the top. The tactic? Imposed artificial hierarchies via pseudoscience and church doctrine, preventing pan-colonial resistance. Why unite when you're told the other is a savage? This fragmented labor forces from Haitian plantations to Mexican mines. The impact? It sustained minority dominance. By 1800, just 10% of colonial populations were European, yet they ruled through division. Bartolome de las Casas' writings expose how this othering echoed ancient barbarian labels, turning human diversity into a chain. Now jumping to more modern racism, which endures as a divide and conquer tool in politics and media, adapting ancient tactics to democracies and digital age. In South Africa, apartheid from 1948 to 1994 segmented society into racial homelands. Whites, blacks, coloreds, Indians forcing geographic and economic isolation. The tactic amplified stereotypes through state media, like portraying black townships as crime dens to justify past laws and raids. This prevented cross-racial solidarity, delaying the end of minority rule. Today it persists. The U.S. Federal Reserve's 2024 data shows black households hold just 13% of white household wealth, a gap fueled by policies that pit minorities against each other. From voter suppression to online tropes, racism distracts from inequality, echoing Sumerians' barbarians in boardrooms and ballots. And we can even think about this just in general as looking at someone differently just because they're a different race, just based off of our lives, our people in our lives, and the environment that we grew up in. And it's all going back to just how they used race to divide in the beginning and how it continues to echo throughout society as a means for control and division. Now, we're going to move to something that is honestly pretty similar to race in a way, and just identity, is religion as a divider. And we're going to start with the ancient roots. Religion roots as a divider traced to Neolithic rituals around 9000 BCE, where a sacred site created us, believers, versus them, profane outsiders. It's always creating this complex of us versus them. In the Ubaid period around 5000 BCE, temples like those at Tel Ubaid marginalized non-adherents by controlling rituals and offerings, turning faith into a border. The tactic claimed divine favor to justify exclusion, linking directly to language myths like Enki's confusion. Gods scattered tongues to enforce spiritual hierarchies. Priests hoarded knowledge, much like Enmerker's cuneiform, isolating the masses. The impact religion became a control valve, unified elites, divided flocks. Göbekli Tepe's T-pillars carved with ancient animals symbolizing clans show how early sacred divides that foreshadowed ziggurats and crusades. So we can obviously, we've heard the stories, but religion in the medieval divide and conquer, where Christianity and Islam was weaponized by rulers from the 5th to the 15th century, and the Crusades were launched in 1095 by Pope Urban II, is a stark example. They pitted Latin Christians against Muslims over holy sites, promising salvation for infidels' blood. The tactic, hearsay accusations, unified monarchs and the mobs against others, Jews, heretics like Cathars or pagans, diverting peasant unrest toward external foes. Indulgences funded wars, fragmenting Europe into sectarian fiefdoms. The impact, it consolidated papal and royal power. The Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople in 1204, a Christian on Christian betrayal. Chronicles like Joinville's show how faith unity was a veil for divide and conquer. And you can just see how much war, mostly all wars and conflict have to do with God and whose God is whose. And even you can see Christians, people who are built on the fact that they love others and their enemies, and that they're going to go to war still for their God versus the Muslim God. And this goes back to the Old Testament. It's this constant war between different tribes and constant war because of God. So if you can see how war is justified in the doctrine, then how war can echo and division will continue because of it. Now over to India in the Indus Valley and the caste systems, which engineered social division around 3300 BCE, where burial goods implied rigid hierarchies of elites and laborers. By the Vedic period around 1500 BCE, India's Varna system codified this into 4 classes: Brahmins, Kshatris, Vaishyas, and Sudras. And this is the highest level are the priests and academics, and then the warriors, and then kings, followed by the merchants and landowners, and the commoneers and peasants. And then even another line under called the untouchables. And these are the out-of-caste street sweepers and latrin cleaners. And they use sacred texts like the Manusmriti and block cross-caste ties with taboos on marriage, dining, and akin to mythic language isolation, no shared tongue across borders. Outcasts were invented later, deepening the fracture. The impact, it fragmented society into non-intermarrying silos, ensuring Brahmin control. Harappan seals with yogic figures hint at proto-caste, showing how spiritual order mass power grabs. And there's nothing these people can really do because it's a part of the identity and the religion of the people. So when you're born into one of these classes, escape is impossible. So we can go into how the British used the caste as a control. And the British they knew what they did, and they were largely responsible for the caste system that you see nowadays. The 1909 Morley-Minto reforms, for instance, introduced separate electorates reserving seats by caste and religion, Hindus versus Muslims versus lower caste, turning identity into a vote bank weapon. The tactic, census bureaus rigidified fluid jadis into fixed categories, deepening fissures with divide et impera policies that favored upper castes as collaborators. This prevented unified revolts like the 1957 mutiny, and it sowed seeds for partition in 1947. British ethnographers like Herbert Risley mapped castes as racial types, echoing European racism and ensuring loyalty fractures. Now we're going to transition into modern division. And we're going to notice this shift is from mythic and physical fractures like Enki's tongues or Roman provinces to ideological and digital ones that scale ancient tribalism globally. New tools like mass media and AI don't invent division, they amplify it exponentially, turning whispers into roars. Our visual timeline, from Enmerker tablet to the swirling algorithm, traces this arc. Prehistoric walls become echo chambers. Babel's confusion becomes personalized feeds. In the 20th century, radio and TV polarized nations. Today, platforms like X and TikTok do it in real time. This evolution isn't progress, it's the same strategy turbocharged. Understanding the bridge helps us see how we can cross back into unity. And just using an ancient lens on modern division is a good way to show how it really works. And you have enough examples from earlier to really understand it now. So now, we are going to jump into what today's arena for divide and conquer is, and it's social media, where platforms like X, TikTok, and Facebook exploit our mythic in-group biases, those same tribal pulls from Neolithic clans. In this context, with 4.9 billion users worldwide, these apps aren't neutral, they're engineered for engagement. The mechanism, AI curates a modern babel of echo chambers, fragmenting users into isolated bubbles of rage and confirmation. Pew Research's 2024 data shows 70% of US adults get news from social media, where algorithms prioritize divisive content over facts. This scales ancient tactics, just as Enki scattered tongues, code scatters narratives, making global unity feel impossible. We'll unpack the pipeline next, but remember, profit drives it, not progress. Now, we're going to jump into how AI algorithms drive division. At its overview, personalization fragments us like Enki's mythic tongues, curating feeds that reinforce isolation over connection. The processes are insidious. Machine learning scans your likes, dwells and shares to tailor content, then amplifies extremes because outrage boosts dwell time by 30%. Platforms use collaborative filtering. If you engage with one partisan post, it floods you with similar, creating a feedback loop of radicalization. The outcome? Digital scatters, societies fractured into silos where truth is whatever keeps you scrolling. A 2023 MIT study found divisive posts spread 6 times faster than facts. By 2025, with deeper AI, it's worse. This isn't accidental, it's the business model. Alright, so the first thing that we gotta jump into is what is a filter bubble? Filter bubbles mark the starting point of digital division. Their isolated information ecosystems are modern equivalent of language divides, where algorithms cocoon you in agreeable content. The mechanism? History-based filters. Your past clicks, searches, and pauses train the AI to hide dissent, creating a personalized tongue you never question. So they're just showing you exactly what you want to see all the time. For example, searching immigration on YouTube. If you've liked anti-immigration videos, it serves fear-mongering clips from fringe channels. Pro users get heartwarming integration stories. Google's 2024 Transparency Report admits these bubbles reduce viewpoint diversity by 40%. It's subtle at first, like a cozy room, but soon the outside world feels alien. And this is just the start of how these filter bubbles create these echo chambers. When presented with enough filter bubbles, confirmation bias starts to take stage. Our psychological basis to seek affirming information, where we ignore contradictions, and it makes us perfect marks for their algorithms. So humans, we love to confirm that what we are learning is right, and that we have this motivated reasoning only to find what we want to see. The algorithm's role, it prioritizes agreement ruthlessly, ranking content by predicted engagement, which spikes with echo-y stuff. Reuters' 2024 Digital News Report found 62% of users trust algorithm-curated news over editors, as it feels made for me. This bias, rooted in cognitive dissonance, avoidance turns bubbles into fortresses. A conservative user sees stolen election proofs, liberals get insurrection deep vibes. The result, polarization skyrockets, and this division increases, which makes the people so much easier to control because no one agrees on anything anymore. And Pew data shows 80% of partisans avoid cross-aisle talks. People won't even talk to each other about it because they think they're so right because all they see is what they want to see. And this is what these filter bubbles are doing, which then leads to what is an echo chamber. So, filter bubbles then evolve into full echo chambers, reinforced silos where only like-minded voices bounce back and amplify isolation. So, the difference between a filter bubble and an echo chamber is that a filter bubble is the feed that you're given, and you can still search out for other information, while an echo chamber is you literally just look at what your filter bubble is, and that's all you believe and that's all you want. So you trap yourself in these walls and you stay, and it increases this isolation. And this repeated exposure strengthens the group identity, and dopamine hits from likes bond you to the tribes. So on X, for example, political clusters like MAGA or Resist form self-sealing networks. Algorithms push you deeper. Within 2024, Oxford studies showing 90% of feeds in these groups are intra-group shares. It's a digital village, safe but blind, echoes of mythic Babel, scattered not by gods but by code that rewards conformity over curiosity. So the supercharger of this process is the emotional contagion, the rapid spread of anger, fear, or joy through these networks, but algorithms favor the dark side. Definitionally, an emotional contagion is like a virus. Posts evoking strong feelings infect feed faster. The more you feel, the more you want to spread. The mechanism, platforms boost charge posts because they spike metrics. A 2023 MIT study found anger-driven content gets double the shares of neutral as it triggers fight responses. Fear of the other, immigrants, elites spread like Enki's confusion, radicalizing quietly. TikTok's short-form virality makes it like wildfire. One outrage clip seeds 1,000 replies. The data underscoring it, emotional posts see 20% higher retention, turning platforms into contagion engines. So, this radicalization pipeline is the endgame. The 3-step conveyor from bubbles to full extremism. Filter bubbles isolate you with mild biases. Step 2, echo chambers reinforce via confirmation and contagion, hardening views. And step 3, extremism kicks in as algorithm serves fringe content and anger pushes you to manifest those. YouTube's 2010s recommendations exemplify this. A search for Jordan Peterson led to alt-right videos per a 2019 study showing 70% of users escalated to hate speech in weeks. It's a slippery slope. Start with grievances, end with recruitment. Like Akkadian borders, it fragments the mind, making conquest personal. So the end game for the people in control is to keep these people separated. So what are they going to do? They're going to create radicalization like they always have. And they're going to use new versions and the worst versions to be the weapon. If they have these digital technologies to be the weapon, they're going to use it as a weapon because of how much easier it is to control using a global scale. So we're going to go into like a modern case study of how it's being used in the past like 10, 15 years. And our case study is ISIS's online radicalization from 2014 onward, a masterclass in digital divide and conquer. They targeted alienated youth with grievance propaganda, videos framing Western life as oppressive, exploiting economic and cultural divides. The tactic, digital confusion of narratives, tailored memes and tweets in multiple languages created Babel-like silos, drawing 30,000 foreign fighters. Platforms amplified it unwittingly. Facebook's 2015 algorithm pushed 2,000% more extremist views. The impact, global scaling from London lone wolves to Paris attacks, showing how AI turns mythic scatters into worldwide threats. UN reports detail 50,000 plus accounts banned, but the pipelines persist. And you can even see how online radicalization, mostly right now, you can see these pro-Israel and anti-Israel propaganda very much on both sides. You're seeing horrible things about Israel, horrible things about Hamas, and it's becoming quite hard to know what is real and what's not. So we can even tie back into racism here with algorithms and how they amplify stereotypes in a feedback loop that echoes Sumerian barbarian lore. In context, with biased training data, AI perpetuates divides. Facial recognition fails on darker skin 35% more, per NIST 2023. Example, viral X race-baiting posts like 2024 threads exaggerating crime waves in black communities get boosted for engagement, reaching millions. The impact, it deepens mistrust, turning neighborhoods into digital no-goes. Oxford's 2024 analysis found 40% of U.S. racial discourse on X is algorithm-fueled toxicity, justifying policies like stop and frisk. Like ancient labels, it unifies us against them, but at warp speed. And you can see the divide only continues, and how cherry-picked information, all of it. Now, I'm going to go into the most modern algorithm evolutions, where this is literally just Babel reloaded, where updates turn platforms into hyper-fragmented myth makers. In context, TikTok's March 2025 update now categorizes videos as humorous, informative, or emotional, using AI to track user reactions like full watches or shares. I mean, that's fucking insane. The mechanism, enhanced AI detects micro-emotions via dwell time and biometric proxies, feeding users extreme variants of their tongue, localized misinformation in Arabic or Spanish dialects. Take TikTok. It distinguishes emotional content to boost resonant feeds, per Shortimize analysis. LinkedIn's August 2025 changes buried generic posts, rewarding relevant ones that silo by ideology or profession, creating echo-boosted networks. The impact? Global discourse fractures into over 100 algorithmic tongues, mirroring Enki's scatter, but personalized unity feels archaic. Think about it, these platforms are only going to divide more and more and create these crazy radicalization that they want. No one's going to agree on anything. So, contemporary politics brings divide and conquer home. Look at 2025 playbook by Trump, reviving Roman tactics in American media wars. In context, with his second term underway, it's a masterclass in fragmentation and amid economic strains. The tactic, a divide, conquer triad. Scapegoat minorities to distract from policy failures, amplified by rallies and acts. For example, April's 2025 Higher Ed Compact promises fee freezes for compliant schools, pitting public versus private institutions in an ideological battle to reshape education. Similarly, threats to LGBTQ rights, like 2025 executive orders targeting trans healthcare, scapegoat a visible minority to rally the base. And don't miss the midterm redistricting push in Kentucky, where October 2025 debates frame gerrymandering as a fair tool to lock in GOP majorities, echoing Tennessee's playbook of splitting Democratic voters. I mean, this goes both ways. It just happened in California as well, with the Democrats legalizing gerrymandering. Brookings' April 2025 report on nationwide protest notes over 1,000 events against these divides, boosting turnout but eroding national unity. While the authoritarian playbook for 2025 urges pro-democracy coalitions to counter this pre-crisis on X. A February 2025 thread from Truth Trump Post highlighted Trump and Musk calling out media's divide and conquer on their alliance, framing it as elite versus people. Classic deflection. It's a colonial 2.0. Fear unifies us, scatters them. So, shifting to algorithmic polarization in the spotlight, 2025's debates are heating up, blaming code for societal rifts, but emerging studies reveal it's baked into network dynamics. In context, as platforms tweak for quality engagement, voices like Rep. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, are sounding alarms. On October 7th, she tweeted that Americans are being algorithmically polarized, with feeds herding us into irreconcilable camps, worsening divides on everything from elections to culture wars. The mechanism? Echo chambers form even without heavy AI. A Science.org simulation from August 15 showed stripped down social networks splitting users into polarized groups purely through homophily, liking likes, then supercharged by 2025's engagement metrics like TikTok's emotional categorization. That the whole thing about AOC and calling out October 7th and algorithmic polarization is because I'm going to highlight again the propaganda being put out from both pro-Israel and pro-Hamas sides. And, October 7th is a very questionable day, and I feel like with the most extreme version of intelligence that you can have, that you probably would have had the information about an event like that, which scares me because the people in power don't really care. And I think I've gone over that before. They don't really give a fuck about anyone. So why would they give a fuck about us? And the whole thing, like AOC, is she that reliable? Probably not. Calls for reform are growing. Redesign platforms for bridging content, not just bubbles. This isn't just tech, it's our modern Enki scattering tongues for profit. And you can just see how the polarization just continues. I'm just going into these examples trying to hammer in how Divide and Conquer works, examples of how Divide and Conquer has worked, and how they're using Divide and Conquer just like ancient times, how nothing has changed, just the weapons. So how are we going to counter this Divide and Conquer? I mean, we got to look within ourselves, and we got to be able to break these algorithms and filter bubbles. It's extremely hard because once you have a solid idea of something, it becomes your identity. And once you have your identity, you try to use anything you can to protect it. And looking for opposing views is not something that's going to help protect your identity, so you're probably not going to want to do it very often because we don't like doing stuff we don't want to do. But sometimes it takes us being mindful and aware, as I always say, and finding that we can do this. We can look for opposing ideas. Use resources that show you the left and the right. Try to get off these social media apps and don't use them for your main source of news. Know that you're in a filter bubble. Know that you're echo chambering yourself. Just become aware of what's happening. And I think that we can escape this division. It's just, where are we going to head? Are we going to head into a digital world, or are we going to head into a physical world? And I think we're heading more into a digital world, which is scary, because I'm very uncertain about how we would return after something like that, and how we could unite. So we got a call to action. We got to know the divide and conquer techniques. We got to know through racism, language divide. We got to know through social media algorithms, hate, radicalization. All this stuff is a method to keep the people in control. It is way easier to control people when they can't fucking unite. How are you going to unite with someone if you can't even talk about opposing opinions? It's like it's all fact now. It's not fact. And it's time to wake up. And it's time to tell people to wake up and to escape this algorithm that they've got themselves put in. Because, essentially, you're speaking another language now. So become aware. Thank you. And I hope you learned something from this episode. Very long one, but I enjoyed it.